Hello friends, how are you today and where are you listening from? In today's video, we'll talk about what it really means to live mindfully. What if mindfulness isn't meditation, accessible only to the chosen few, but a way to turn off autopilot right here and now? Did you know that ancient practices and modern neuroscience converge on one important truth? Being present in the moment changes both the brain and destiny. The taboo surrounding the question, "Why am I alive?" has been lifted. Let's dare to hear the answer. Now, allow yourself to listen as the path begins to unfold before you. The noise of daily life often buries the simplest truths beneath layers of distraction. In the rhythm of constant notifications, unfinished tasks, and restless thoughts, the ability to notice what is already here slips quietly away. Yet awareness begins in the smallest gesture, as subtle as the way air enters through the nostrils and leaves again, unclaimed and unadorned. Allow yourself to pause and notice that breath, not as a mechanical action, but as the very thread that holds you in existence. The stillness between inhalation and exhalation opens a space where depth becomes visible. In that fragile silence, the present moment reveals itself like a mirror that has always been waiting, yet rarely approached with attention. Within that pause, the question of meaning does not arrive as an abstract philosophy or distant theory. It comes naturally, the way dawn emerges without needing to be summoned. The inquiry is not, "What should I achieve to matter?" but what is already here when I stop running after or away? The question, arising from presence, becomes the seed of conscious living. Every ordinary action contains the possibility of such discovery. A sip of water, the sensation of feet on the floor, the sound of leaves shifting in the wind. Each can be an invitation to see life without the filters of habit. Awareness is not an added practice layered on top of existence, but the recovery of what has never been lost. When the ordinary becomes transparent, it reveals its hidden weight, the mystery of being itself. From that recognition, the search for meaning transforms into the art of perceiving clearly. Nothing extra is required. Clarity is not something created, but uncovered. And it is in this uncovering that the journey into conscious living quietly begins. In ancient teachings, a story is told about a blind turtle living deep in the vast ocean. Once every 100 years, this turtle rises to the surface, and on that surface floats a single wooden ring carried by the waves. The chances of the turtle placing its head through that ring by accident are nearly impossible, yet not entirely absent. In Buddhist tradition, this image is used to describe how rare it is to be born as a human being. To hear this parable is to be reminded that human life is not simply an ordinary occurrence, but an extraordinary possibility. Just as the turtle's encounter with the floating ring defies the odds, so too does the emergence of awareness within us. It suggests that the opportunity to ask questions, to reflect, to seek meaning, is itself a rare jewel. Life is not only a continuation of instinct, but also the ability to step back and witness one's own existence. The ring, fragile and floating, symbolizes the narrow opening through which consciousness can awaken. Most beings drift with currents, pulled by the tides of survival and instinct. Yet human life carries a capacity that interrupts this drift, the ability to inquire, to ask, "What is this moment? What is the nature of my being?" is to glimpse clarity through that rare opening. When this realization enters, it shifts perspective. No longer does the day appear as a series of mechanical tasks. Instead, each action begins to shine with the possibility of deeper meaning. Washing one's hands, speaking to another person, or noticing the sound of a bird, all can be approached with reverence once it is seen that the very chance to notice them is extraordinary. The shift is subtle yet profound, from taking life for granted to seeing it as a gift beyond calculation. In that subtle shift, the first ray of clarity appears. It is like a thin beam of sunlight piercing through heavy clouds, unexpected yet undeniable. This light does not answer every question, nor does it erase suffering, but it changes the way questions are held. Instead of demanding solutions, the mind begins to appreciate the miracle of having the capacity to wonder at all. The turning point is not dramatic, but it carries weight. To recognize that life itself is rare, fragile, and precious is to awaken to responsibility. With this awareness, the urge to live blindly, chasing after fleeting satisfactions, starts to soften. Something more enduring calls, the desire to live consciously, to honor the rarity of this existence with clarity and care. In the unfolding of daily existence, life often resembles what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. Joy arrives for a brief moment, like a spark lighting the night, only to fade almost immediately. The new possession, the long-awaited recognition, the brief success, each excites the senses, yet the glow dims faster than expected. Sadness then returns, familiar and persistent, as though waiting behind the curtain of every achievement. This pattern reveals itself in countless forms. The taste of sweetness lingers on the tongue but soon dissolves. The thrill of praise echoes in the chest but fades into silence. Even pain, once believed to be endless, eventually softens. Each state is temporary, and the human mind, unaware of this rhythm, keeps reaching to grasp what slips away and keeps fleeing what will eventually change on its own. The attempt to cling to pleasure is like holding water tightly in the hand. The more pressure is applied, the faster it escapes through the fingers. Avoiding discomfort is no less futile, for every step away from fear or grief seems to lead toward another encounter with them. Life becomes a cycle, pursuing what cannot last, escaping what cannot be avoided, endlessly repeating the same pattern. Yet in the quiet act of observation, the cycle begins to reveal itself for what it is. By noticing the rise and fall of emotions without rushing to control them, clarity emerges. Joy is seen not as something to be captured, but as a passing visitor. Sorrow is not an enemy to be defeated, but a movement of the heart that eventually transforms. The treadmill does not disappear, but awareness steps off it. This recognition marks the beginning of freedom. Not freedom from pain or pleasure, but freedom from being bound by them. When the cycle is observed rather than obeyed, the restless chase loses its power. Life no longer needs to be measured by constant highs or lows. Instead, it can be lived as it is, with presence steady enough to witness both delight and despair without drowning in either. In this space of recognition, the question of meaning deepens. What if existence is not about maximizing pleasure or minimizing pain? What if it is about seeing the rhythm itself, understanding the impermanence that underlies all experiences? Such insight softens the struggle, transforming reaction into reflection. Here, the seed planted by awareness begins to grow stronger roots. To live consciously begins not with complex rituals, but with a simple act of stopping. The momentum of thoughts, emotions, and desires pushes forward like a rushing river, yet when one pauses, even briefly, the current is interrupted. This pause is not emptiness. It is a doorway into seeing. In the silence of stopping, the restless mind slowly loosens its grip. Breath becomes the anchor of this practice. Each inhalation rises like a gentle wave, and each exhalation falls like a returning tide. By noticing these waves, attention shifts from being scattered across countless distractions to dwelling in the body's rhythm. The air, unnoticed in ordinary haste, now becomes the guide that leads inward. As awareness rests on breathing, hidden attachments reveal themselves. The craving for control, the longing for approval, the resistance to discomfort, all surface in the stillness, as though rising from beneath a quiet lake. These are not enemies to fight against, but patterns to be seen. Seeing them clearly dissolves their power, like shadows that disappear when exposed to light. The slowing down changes the texture of existence. Tension that once felt permanent softens, like knots loosening in a rope. The noise of inner dialogue, rehearsed arguments, remembered regrets, imagined futures, grows quieter. Underneath the turbulence, another layer becomes perceptible. Clarity that does not need to be created, for it has always been present. Clarity is not dramatic. It is gentle, steady, like the faint glow of dawn before sunrise. Yet it transforms the way ordinary moments are experienced. Eating no longer means rushing to finish, but tasting each bite. Walking is not only moving from one place to another, but feeling the contact of feet on the earth. Listening is not merely waiting for a turn to respond, but truly receiving the words of another. Through such practices, awareness is no longer an abstract concept, but a lived reality. Each small action, when done with presence, becomes a training ground for conscious living. Stopping does not mean withdrawing from life. It means entering it more deeply. The choice to pause, to breathe, to notice, becomes the first true action toward freedom. In this simple discipline lies the beginning of transformation. What once seemed like an endless cycle of restlessness now appears as a pattern that can be shifted. The act of stopping becomes the seed of conscious action, and from this seed grows the possibility of living with balance, care, and insight. When silence deepens, another truth quietly emerges, the shadow of mortality. Beneath every desire for pleasure and every effort to escape pain lies a deeper fear, the fear of ending. Death, so often hidden from conversation, shapes the way choices are made. It drives the longing for renewal, the hope for a second chance, the fantasy that life can be restarted like a broken game. Yet ancient wisdom speaks differently. It teaches that existence does not vanish when the body ceases to move. What continues is not the individual personality, with its memories and names, but the momentum of actions and intentions. This is the law of cause and effect, a thread that weaves every thought, word, and deed into the tapestry of what follows. In this view, karma is not punishment handed down by unseen forces. It is simply continuity, the way a seed becomes a tree, and the fruit carries new seeds. Each impulse sown in the present inevitably bears consequences, shaping the flow of future experience. To imagine that death erases this continuity is to mistake the breaking of a vessel for the disappearance of water. The stream continues, finding a new path, carrying with it the taste of what was poured into it before. The recognition that death is not an escape transforms the way life is held. Instead of clinging desperately to pleasures as if they must save from finality, attention turns toward the quality of actions themselves. How one speaks, how one responds, how one cares. These are not insignificant details, but the very currents that shape what continues beyond a single lifetime. Fear softens when seen in this light. Death is not an abyss waiting to devour, but a transition within a greater continuum. The anxiety that drives constant distraction begins to lose its grip. Instead of searching for a permanent refuge in impermanent things, awareness learns to dwell in the integrity of the present act. Each moment becomes a place to plant seeds that carry compassion, patience, and clarity forward. This realization marks a turning point, the fracture in the old way of perceiving life. The hope for escape dissolves, replaced by a responsibility toward presence. Mortality is no longer only a threat, it becomes a teacher, reminding that every breath matters and every choice leaves a trace. With this recognition, the path of conscious living deepens, leading toward a more authentic way of being. Beyond the recognition of mortality comes a subtler unveiling, the realization that there is no fixed, unchanging self. What is called I is not a solid entity standing apart from the flow of existence, but rather a continuous stream of sensations, thoughts, and memories. Each moment arises fresh, replacing the last, like waves rising and falling upon the surface of the sea. The idea of a permanent identity is revealed as an illusion, a useful convention for communication, but not the ultimate truth. Life can be seen as a flame passed from one candle to another. The flame continues, yet it is never the same fire twice. In this way, existence is not the repetition of personalities, but the continuation of conditions set in motion by choices. What returns is not the actor, but the effects of actions, not the name, but the echo of deeds. This understanding loosens the fear of loss, for it becomes clear that continuity is not dependent upon clinging to form. When the myth of a solid self dissolves, responsibility deepens. Every word spoken, every gesture made, contributes to the movement of this ongoing stream. Nothing vanishes without leaving a trace, just as no ripple on water is without consequence. To live consciously, then, is to recognize that each choice plants a seed within the endless field of becoming. This perspective transforms daily life. Instead of being consumed by the story of me and mine, attention shifts toward the quality of the unfolding process itself. Anger is seen not as a fixed trait, but as a passing storm. Kindness is not a possession, but a radiance that can be shared. The stream flows on, carrying forward what is cultivated in each passing moment. With this realization, the sense of isolation begins to soften. The boundaries between self and other appear less rigid, for both are movements within the same vast current. Compassion arises naturally, not as moral duty, but as recognition of shared flow. To harm another is to disturb the stream in which one also moves. To nurture another is to strengthen the waters that sustain all. This unveiling changes the narrative of existence. Life is no longer about defending an unshakable identity, but about participating in a living continuum. The ego loosens its hold, and in its place emerges a broader awareness, one that sees continuity without clinging, responsibility without fear, and connection without separation. This is the deeper revelation of conscious living. As understanding ripens, attention shifts from the abstract to the practical, how to live with less suffering. The teachings of the middle way emerge here, not as dogma, but as guidance toward balance. Life does not ask for extremes of indulgence or harsh denial. Instead, it invites harmony, the steady tuning of existence into just enough. To indulge endlessly in desire is to drown in the flood of craving. Every pleasure chased turns quickly into dissatisfaction, demanding more. Yet to deny every joy, to live in rigid austerity, is to starve the spirit, reducing life to a dry shell. The middle way offers a path between these poles, reminding that wisdom lies not in excess or absence, but in proportion. Balance begins with awareness. When one eats, it is not the act of grasping at flavor, nor the act of rejecting it, but the simple act of nourishment. When one speaks, it is not about forcing silence nor indulging in endless words, but about choosing speech that carries clarity and kindness. The middle way does not deny the senses, nor does it make them a prison. It allows them to serve their natural purpose without demanding they deliver what they cannot. Permanent satisfaction. Walking this path requires patience. The mind is drawn toward the comfort of extremes, seeking security in rigid rules or in unrestrained freedom. Yet both lead back to suffering. To remain in balance is like holding a candle flame steady against the wind, neither smothering it with the hand nor leaving it exposed to be extinguished. Balance is fragile, but with practice it becomes resilience. The middle way is not merely personal, but relational. In encounters with others, balance shapes communication. Harsh words wound, but false sweetness deceives. True speech rests in honesty, tempered with compassion. In relationships, neither dependence nor isolation bring peace. Connection flourishes where freedom and care coexist, where neither control nor neglect dominates. Living in balance does not mean living without challenges. It means meeting challenges without being consumed by them. The middle way does not promise perfection, but invites a life aligned with harmony. By stepping away from the pull of extremes, one begins to cultivate equanimity, the ability to remain steady amid change. This deepening shows conscious living not as an escape, but as an art of adjustment. Each day, balance is tested, each choice an opportunity to recalibrate. Through this practice, the middle way becomes less of a teaching to remember and more of a rhythm to embody, guiding life toward clarity and peace. The true measure of mindfulness does not appear in solitude alone, but is revealed in the space between people. To sit quietly with the breath brings clarity, yet it is in conversation, in conflict, in moments of misunderstanding, that awareness faces its most profound test. Human connection becomes the mirror, where presence is either confirmed or forgotten. Words carry great weight. A phrase spoken without care can pierce deeper than a blade, while a single sentence offered with gentleness can heal wounds long ignored. When mindfulness enters speech, harshness softens. The urge to dominate is replaced by the courage to listen. Communication becomes less about proving and more about understanding. Here, mindfulness proves its worth not in theory, but in practice. Emotions, too, are transformed under the light of awareness. Anger arises like fire, yet presence keeps it from becoming a wildfire that consumes everything in its path. Joy appears like sunlight, yet awareness prevents it from turning into attachment that burns when it fades. Neither suppressed nor exaggerated, emotions are honored as passing visitors. They are felt fully, acknowledged, and allowed to move on without leaving behind the chains of regret. This stability in the face of rising emotions is not indifference. It is strength, the ability to remain steady without losing warmth. In this balance, a new level of connection emerges. Trust begins to grow where previously there was only fear. Relationships deepen when they are grounded not in control, but in mutual respect. Mindfulness, once a personal practice, expands into an ethical presence. It becomes visible in how conflicts are resolved, how kindness is expressed, how truth is spoken. The more awareness permeates communication, the more the ordinary exchanges of life transform into acts of care. At this point, mindfulness is no longer a hidden practice within meditation halls or silent retreats. It steps into the open, shaping communities, guiding families, influencing the texture of society itself. Presence is no longer only a personal refuge, but a bridge between lives. This is the culmination of the practice, awareness woven into the fabric of relationship, not as an ideal, but as a lived reality. Where words once divided, they now connect. Where emotions once ruled, they now illuminate. And where fear once built walls, presence builds trust. This is the strength of conscious living revealed at its height, not in isolation, but in the depth of human connection. The unfolding of conscious living finds its resolution in the meeting of ancient wisdom with modern discovery. What once seemed reserved for mystics in hidden monasteries now finds echoes in laboratories and scientific journals. Neuroscience shows that meditation reshapes the brain, strengthening regions linked to focus, empathy, and emotional regulation. The timeless practice of mindfulness proves itself not only in inner experience, but also in measurable change. This meeting of traditions is not a clash, but a convergence. The image of a monk sitting in silence and the figure of a scientist observing neural pathways are two windows looking into the same room. Both reveal that awareness is not a fleeting abstraction, but a trainable capacity, capable of transforming how life is experienced. Presence becomes a skill, sharpened like any discipline, refined through repetition and care. As this understanding spreads, mindfulness moves beyond the meditation cushion and into daily rhythms. It enters kitchens, offices, schools, and streets. It manifests not in grand gestures, but in the smallest habits, the way one breathes before speaking, the attention given to a meal, the patience shown in a crowded space. These quiet practices become the foundation of a new way of living. The strength of awareness lies in its simplicity. No complex philosophy is required to pause before reacting, to listen instead of interrupting, to notice the warmth of sunlight across the skin. These moments, though ordinary, hold extraordinary power. They remind that life is not waiting to begin in some distant achievement. It unfolds continuously in the present. In this realization, the quest for meaning softens. Meaning is no longer treated as a final treasure hidden at the end of a long road. Instead, it arises naturally, like fragrance released from a flower. By living with presence, meaning reveals itself in the texture of daily acts. The question, "Why do I live?" becomes less urgent, for life itself begins to answer through the way it is lived. This integration marks the resolution of the journey. What began as a struggle against noise and restlessness has matured into a practice embodied in every detail of existence. Conscious living is not an escape from the world, but a way of inhabiting it more fully, carrying ancient insight and modern clarity together into each moment. The journey toward conscious living does not conclude with a single revelation, for awareness is not an endpoint, but an ongoing unfolding. Meaning is not discovered as a final object to be possessed. It emerges in the way one meets each moment. To live consciously is to see that life is not waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. It is already here, flowing through breath, sensation, and presence. When the struggle to control reality begins to quiet, a profound shift occurs. Existence no longer feels like a battle to be won, but like a song to be heard in its entirety. Each note, whether gentle or dissonant, belongs to the whole. Resisting only distorts the melody, while acceptance allows its full beauty to appear. This is the essence of integration, meeting life as it is, without the constant demand for it to be otherwise. In this way, the question of meaning transforms. It no longer requires an abstract answer or a permanent conclusion. Instead, meaning arises naturally when life is lived with clarity and care. It is felt in the silence shared with another, in the patience of listening, in the courage of honesty. Meaning is not hidden in distant philosophies, but revealed in the integrity of everyday actions. To live consciously is also to live lightly. The weight of endless striving lifts when one realizes that nothing extra is required. Simplicity becomes richness, and presence itself becomes the treasure. A short life, lived in fullness, carries more depth than a long life spent in distraction. Awareness does not lengthen time, but it deepens it, turning fleeting days into profound experience. This integration is not retreat from the world, but immersion in it with open eyes. Work continues, relationships continue, responsibilities remain. Yet they are carried differently, no longer as burdens, but as opportunities for mindful participation. Each act, however small, becomes a chance to embody compassion, patience, and balance. And so, the journey circles back to its beginning. The question, what does it mean to live consciously, does not dissolve but continues to echo, each time answered in a new way by the living of life itself. Conscious living is less about holding on to certainties and more about walking with awareness, step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment. This is the invitation left behind, not to seek an answer in words alone, but to let life itself reveal its meaning through presence. In this unfolding, even the briefest life becomes luminous, deep, and whole. The path of conscious living does not end with clarity, but continues as a rhythm woven into daily life. Awareness is not a peak to be conquered, but a gentle stream that shapes the way each moment is received. When the chase for certainty softens, presence itself becomes the quiet answer. To live consciously is to meet life without resistance, to walk neither in grasping nor in avoidance, but in balance. It is to see that meaning does not arrive as a sudden revelation hidden at the finish line. Instead, it unfolds like light across the horizon, appearing slowly, always enough to guide the next step. Every breath, every word, every gesture becomes part of this unfolding. Consciousness does not require withdrawal from the world, but immersion in it with open eyes. Work, relationships, responsibilities remain, yet they are lived differently, infused with clarity and care. What once seemed ordinary now carries the texture of sacredness. This is the gift of awareness, the ability to dwell fully in what is already present. Even brief lives gain depth when lived with presence. Even fleeting moments reveal eternity when met with attention. Conscious living is not about escaping impermanence, but embracing it, allowing each passing moment to shine in its fullness. And so the journey continues, not with final answers, but with a renewed way of being. Awareness itself becomes the meaning, and life, in its simplicity, is enough.